All right, everyone. Today we're having another one of our interviews. Today we have Ray Alma. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
So Ray, what have you worked on that maybe my students might have seen or
If
interacted
they're
with?
if they're old enough, if the Mad Magazine was something I had started on in the '90s, up until they basically ceased publication a few years back.
Did they? Okay.
Although it kind of had it's kind of come back. They've been reprinting, but also starting to use new stuff. So kind of ended, but is still kind of it's like a zombie version of Mad Magazine, which is odd. But
As a
that
kid of the 80s and 90s, Mad Magazine was always a very popular
yeah.
publication with
Usually when I
kids.
mention it, people are almost more familiar with the Mad TV show or the Mad
Sure, yeah.
cartoon show. They think it was that, but no, this is a magazine that goes back to the
Right.
50s that inspired me growing up. But print is not
Right.
what it was anymore. And in
Sure.
fact, that was one of the reasons that I got involved in animation in the first place was because
Mm,
I was mainly an illustrator for magazines. I was a cartooning major,
sure.
actually, and then worked in print for most of my career. And in about '05, like print was dying, and I had
Right.
to switch careers, find something to keep the bills
Sure.
paid. So I was able to use my um, sequential art storytelling techniques that I learned as a cartooning major, um,
Mm.
and translate that into storyboards for animation. So for over 20 years now, I've been working in animation, doing storyboards, mostly TV,
Mhm.
all here on the East Coast, but for some productions that have ended up on the West Coast. So currently, the thing I'm working on is a reboot of Beavis and Butthead,
Mhm.
which also, if they're older people might know from the '90s,
Sure.
started like 30 years
My
ago.
generation, yeah, totally. As a kid of the 80s, 90s, Beavis and Butthead were very popular with my generation.
And it's and even that's had like a
Right.
resurgence. The SNL sketch brought it into like the public
Yeah,
eye
yeah, brought it
pretty
back.
recently. So yeah, they're not bad. They're currently airing on Comedy Central, and we're currently working on a fourth season of this reboot.
Oh, great.
And I do storyboards on the show.
Sure. So one thing I always kind of ask every person, where does your love of, we'll say like drawing or art, or because it doesn't have to be animation for you, since you're more in the sort of static side of it, but like where does that love come from? Or where does it begin?
It's just it's growing up and just ingesting all of that stuff as a child growing up. So as a child of the '70s,
Hmm.
cartoon Mad Magazine, Marvel
Sure,
Comics,
sure.
DC Comics. But I movies. I loved movies and animated movies. A lot
Sure.
of like Disney stuff. The Disney stuff from the '70s, the original productions weren't that great, but
Right.
they were always re-releasing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and
Sure.
Cinderella, and you could get to experience all this stuff. And so yeah, just all taking all that in. But I never even considered any of that as a potential career
Mm,
until I was in high school, and I had to take a career test in my senior year of
mm.
high school. I didn't know what I was going to end up doing, and uh, this we had to answer all these questions on paper. Um, Examples of which would be like, would you work for somebody else? Would you get up
Right.
early? And I answered questions the way I thought you should be answered for a job.
Right.
And then once they computed it, out came agricultural engineer.
Okay. Sure.
And I went back to the teacher running it, and I said, "This is a mistake. I don't even like plants. Like, why?"
Right.
So the teacher was like, were you honest?" I said, "No." And they said, "Do it again." So no, I don't. I don't want to. I don't want to answer to a boss. I don't want to get up early.
Right. Right.
Um, which that's some of the key factors for being self-employed as a freelancer.
Sure.
And there must have been other questions more specifically about what my interests were. And cartoonist came out the second time, and then I
Mhm.
was like, I'm going to be a cartoonist. And then
Right.
luckily, living here in New York City, I had access to the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, which started as a school for cartoonists. and it's the I
Mhm.
think it's still the only place in the country you can major in cartooning. So that's what I did.
Great. So you mentioned, being an illustrator for a long time. You mentioned, doing Mad Magazine. I'm sure other magazines you were doing cartoons for. And then you made the switch to animation. Was there any kind of differences there? Like what was different about maybe doing
No,
that versus like,
it was kind of a seamless transition aside
okay,
from something very specific that happens in animation that you don't encounter in comic books, which is this 180-degree rule. Do you
okay, right, yeah,
so for those of you who don't know, it's very it can be very specific where um I'll do a little example here, but my models I keep on my table when I have to draw these guys. So if you have a scene where one character is on one side of the screen and the other character is on the other side of the screen, and they're having a conversation with each other, and then you cut to the next shot, and if they reverse quickly in the very next shot, that it causes the audience to be like, well,
confused.
wait, he just turned into Butthead. Like
Right,
on in comic books, it's not an issue because you're looking at the whole page, so you can break that rule going from panel to panel. In
right,
animation, that's a huge no-no. So it
right,
was like that was something I was unaware of and had such a hard time keeping in mind. Like I just
sure,
wanted to rush ahead, and so aside from that 180-degree rule of filmmaking, it was everything is very much similar to what you would experience with just regular comic book sequential art. It's a lot of like choosing the different angles and the
sure,
emotion and the acting that the characters will do. Um, all very important to communicating the story.
sure. So you mentioned you say you work. Have you always been freelance, or have there were periods you worked for a particular
Well,
company?
at the beginning of my career was all freelance.
Hmm.
So yeah, self-employed, just working from job to job,
Right,
which is great. Not having to answer to a boss and keeping your
sure,
own
sure,
as long as you make deadlines. But then the downside is you have to get your own health insurance. You have
sure.
to you gotta you're always hustling to try to get a job. And then when I started working in animation and it became like a full-time job,
Hmm.
like I had to punch a clock. I had to be in at a certain time. But now I was getting health benefits, and after I was at one studio
Right,
for enough time, I got vacation pay, and I'm like, whoa,
sure,
I get paid to not
right,
work for a week. This is pretty great. But that goes off and on. Like
sure,
a lot of animation is tied into per project the
right,
duration of the project. So if it's a movie, you're working on that movie through the duration. When it's over, you're unemployed again. If you're
right,
working on shows, TV shows, you'll have a hiatus. So
right,
production end, like you've done a certain number of episodes, that ends, and then you're waiting around until the show gets picked up to start the
right,
next season. So there's always some downtime. So you always have to kind of prepare for working and then time off of not working.
right,
You want to make sure you have enough money saved so that you can survive those downtimes.
sure. Um, why don't you kind of walk us through what's it like? Let's say you're working on, I don't know, Beavis and Butthead on an episode. Can you walk us through the process of what it's like for you to work with your team, the people, the stakeholders, so to speak, or whatever you want to call them, to take that script or that idea and to storyboard it?
Yeah, we get a script, um, which aren't long for the Beavis and Butthead thing. Each episode are they're shorts, so there'll
Mhm.
be like two stories per half-hour episode that airs.
Right.
So now we're dealing with like a 10-minute story maybe.
Sure.
So it's not a lot of pages. Um, Although one of the more interesting things that happens to storyboard artists is like you'll get handed the script and you'll look at the pages and it's like it'll be not much on the page and
Mhm.
it's like, oh, that's not too much to do. But what happens is you start going through the pages and then there'll be one point you're reading through, characters are talking, things are happening, then you'll hit one paragraph or one sentence that says,
Mhm.
and then all hell breaks loose.
Right.
And that'll be the extent that the writers will
Right,
do
right.
it.
But
But
they
now
don't describe what
that
that means exactly.
that sentence is a week or 2 weeks worth of work because
Right.
storyboard
Right.
artist now has to figure out what that means, what actually is happening, and that turns into a ton of work. It could be a lot of fun though. Sometimes you
Sure.
get a lot of freedom. So we get the script, we talk it over with director and writers, and we hash out what is needed to get done. Then we have like a week of what's called thumbnails. So
Mhm.
really rough sketches for what I think should be happening. The
Mhm.
directors give us feedback on that, and it's good that it's roughly drawn in because there's often a lot of changes. And then after that, we start working on like the clean pass, and that might be like a week per sequence, and I might have like
Mhm.
6 or 7 sequences to do. Um, so I roughly spend about a month per
Per
episode
story
that I'm
or
working
per
on.
episode.
Um, and one of the frustrating things I run into, which just
Mm.
amazes me, is that Beavis and Butthead has been around like since the '90s. It's a show
Mm.
since the '90s, and it's still like we have these characters who exist in this house,
Right.
but sometimes a scene will require because usually they're known for being sitting on a couch in the living room, but now
Right.
like a scene will take place in their kitchen. So I'm like, okay, well, give me the design for the kitchen, and I'll draw
Sure.
them in the kitchen. And I'll hear like, well, we don't have that. We never like in 30 years, you guys never.
Right.
So now I have to sketch out the kitchen. So now
Right.
it's like I have to go back to basic things I learned in art school about
Sure.
perspective, and now I have to draw the room. I'm like,
Right.
I hate drawing this stuff. I hate having to draw a room, but now I have to draw the kitchen that they're fighting in.
Right.
So storyboard artists and have to sometimes do backgrounds, character
Mhm.
design, as well as being in charge of the actual visual storytelling.
As someone who's done storyboarding for as long as you have, what are some tips or things that you would recommend people keep in mind, like my students who, they're doing storyboarding on their own animation ideas? What are some tips or things to think about would you advise them?
It's there needs to be a clarity in
Okay.
the way it's drawn and the way the story is told. Where because I also I teach a storyboarding class also at my alma mater of School of Visual Arts, and I run into where the students know what their story is that they want to
Mhm.
tell, and they
Right.
draw it out, and then they show it, and then they're surprised when me and the rest of the class doesn't understand what
The
what
story.
the story was.
Right.
They know it, and they just
Right.
assume that like well, this one shot will communicate it, and like no, we don't. You haven't given us
Right.
the information to realize
Right.
that this character that you're showing us is an orphan, or that the other character that they're interacting with is actually their dead sister. Uh,
Right. Right.
we need
There has to be storytelling. It can't
you
just
you
be
you have to yeah you have to like you need you want to give your audience credit. You don't want to spoon feed them too much, but at the same time you want to make sure you're giving them enough visual information that the story is getting across. So this understanding about being able to provide enough information. So the clarity in the storytelling, in the drawing, if
Mhm.
the drawing is just too not rendered well enough,
Right.
we're gonna lose it. We're not gonna tell what's happening, who's who, what's going on. Um, just keeping things clean. It's just
Mhm.
is always like is going to be important.
Right. In your career, do you do also animatics
Yeah.
or okay?
Yeah. Well, that's
Mhm.
something too where that has slowly changed over the years. Where storyboarding was very much just it used to be done on paper, and
Right, right,
if you ever like the Disney artists would just tack them up on boards, and you can go
right.
through. Now everything's done digitally, which is fine, which I don't mind. Being able to copy and paste and flip drawings is kind of wonderful. Um, but because we work digitally now, it makes it easier for us as a storyboard artist to do the animatics. So
Sure.
we'll either get the actual audio or what's called scratch audio, where somebody
Mhm.
else just will record
Right. It's kind of temp.
the voice, yeah, a temp soundtrack to work with. And now we have to put the audio in and we have to time it out. And
Right.
so it's almost it's goes without saying that in storyboard you're going to be making an animatic at the end of this. So it's timed out to some kind of verbal audio, sometimes sound effects, maybe a little music.
Mhm.
And I don't mind that too much, except for the fact that basically creating these animatics is what an editor used to do.
Right.
So this is what this is. It's called job creep, where now the storyboard artist is doing the editor's work, and we're not
Sure.
getting paid for anymore for the editing. We're just getting paid to do the storyboards, and but they expect this kind of first pass of editing.
Right. Right.
So it's like you could give us a little more money because we're doing something that we didn't used
Right.
to do. But then on the other hand, I enjoy doing the animatics because I like editors. They're great people, but I don't think editors are as funny as storyboard artists. So
Okay.
especially with a show that involves humor,
Right.
timing is so important. So an editor
Right.
wants to just get it all in, like, all right, we need
Right.
it. But the storyboard artist will be like, we gotta hold here and let the joke breathe a little bit before we immediately go back into whatever the next action is going to be. So I like having that timing control because I
Right.
think I'm funnier than an editor.
Sure. Understood. I mean, the same kind of question. What are some like advice you'd give? What do you give advice to your students when it comes to creating animatics or taking their work and kind of timing it out?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the first answer too, where it's just like on making sure that it all reads clearly. If you're having everything play too fast, um,
Hmm.
you're gonna lose the focus. You want things to be slow enough that the audience can understand where the joke is or where the emotional impact is. Um, but then you don't want it to be so slow that we're just waiting then for something to happen. There's a danger in animation too. Like if nothing's happening, if nothing's moving, you're like, wait, is this thing
Right.
on? Like, did
Is
this
it
thing have
boring?
a
Or
brain?
yeah.
Yeah.
There's an
So
old saying, if it's still, it's dead kind of
yeah,
idea.
yeah, like things have to kind of be kept moving in animation to make sure that the audience still knows that everything's working. And
Right.
there's little tricks that you'll see, and you can see this in like a lot of productions where, um, like the camera will often be just kind of like slowly zooming in
Right. The slow
shot.
pan or
So
slow.
it's yeah, it's things are still moving. Uh,
Right. Or a little bit of breathing. I always tell my students just make them their chest breathe a little bit in and out. Even if it's
playing,
slight,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, yeah. As someone, so, I mean, why don't you, okay, I guess you did talk about sort of the difference between freelance versus working for a company. Let's say my students, they're, taking one or two classes, maybe they've taken a couple drawing classes. Let's say they're interested in working either in animation or in storyboarding. Uh, what would if you were asked to give them advice, this could be education or just whatever. Do you have any advice for them? Like they say, like, I really want to work in this area, maybe in storyboarding, maybe in animating. Is there advice you might give those people?
um,
Or you
it's
could say no, you have no advice.
yeah, no, I
I
mean,
don't want to
but
put you
it's
on the
like,
spot or
what
anything.
it's like. It's such a weird time in the industry at this
Right.
particular moment,
Mm,
um, where and it's just like it's the circumstances beyond our control. So when the pandemic happened a few years ago, animation exploded.
right.
We were huge. Me and every animator I knew, people who work in animation had so much work because
Right.
live action couldn't go forward and
Right.
animators could work from home.
Right. Yeah.
And they were, and yeah, it's like, and we weren't like the way a lot of normal people were stressed out. Artists are kind of like, oh, I gotta work alone at home. Okay, it's like
Right.
we didn't sweat it too much, so we were able to produce content.
Right.
And so animation kind of saved
Yeah,
at
there was a
least
lot of
the
work in
entertainment
animation,
industry.
Yeah.
And then when the world resurfaced, I don't know if it was like maybe a resentment from the studios or like that they had to rely on us. So they really kind of turned away from, and
Right.
so the backlash from that combined with the writers and actors strike that not too
Right. Yeah.
disrupted a lot of productions. And now a lot of studios are so desperate to try to figure out ways to use AI that
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
like it's really limited what how much jobs are out there.
Sure.
I don't know what it's going to be in a couple of years.
Sure. Yeah.
I can't see it ever completely going away. I can't see AI doing everything that we do
Right.
because
I
like especially with like storyboarding, like they so desperately want to take that away from us, and they've created versions of AI where you can just feed it the script and
right. And it comes up
it'll
with
spit
auto
out
ideas. Yeah.
a bunch of images. That doesn't take into account that what I feel like what I do is like a very collaborative process with the directors and the writers where I'm not just drawing what the script is telling me to do. I'm interpreting it and coming up with ideas about how to make it funnier, how to,
Right.
I don't think that's working. We should do this instead. And the programs can't do that. So the ability to be human and think these things,
Right.
I think, are going to save at least the storytelling, the storyboarding aspect. Things like character design, background design, I think might have more trouble finding work.
Yeah, I mean, I've my theory on this as someone who kind of keeps a foot in the tech world is I think where we are with AI in terms of all sort of digital art and in different industries that use it is like we're kind of where they were in the 80s when they kind of made the switch to computers versus analog, where it's like yes, I think some particular jobs or job aspects may go away. Um, but I think they'll be replaced with other newer ones. And like you said, it's like I've read plenty of AI stories and they're not great. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, it's free, but if I'm a business and I'm making this movie and no one goes to it, then I just lost a whole bunch. You know what I mean? It's like yes, you can get it, but if it's not engaging, and people know what engages with them, and what, at the end of the day, as a business, if you're a production, you're trying to make money. If people don't want to engage with it, you won't make money, or at least enough money that now whether people use AI to auto color in a drawing, yeah, I can see that, or something like that, or you swap the colors from this to this or something really quickly. I could definitely see that as being an aspect, but like the literal like there's kind of the old in animation there's like appeal, right? The sort of je ne sais quoi, like what makes Mickey Mouse or Homer Simpson or any character, like yeah, it's drawn, but it's like what gives it that like oomph that makes you care and
And
makes you
it's
want to
like,
watch.
and it's it's a respect for the audience that
Right.
that AI doesn't have, that like the people who are using the AI to produce stuff just assume that it's good enough, whereas a lot of the people who are in charge of producing things are going to go the extra mile to give the audience credit that they're going to
Sure.
want things to be at the best level possible. So a good example is something very recently where Coca-Cola doubled down and used AI again this year for their holiday commercial that's airing on
Right.
a lot of
Yeah,
shows,
yeah.
and it's all AI and it's terrible. And they
Right.
like and it but it's like it's minute things that like a human wouldn't have done that, because we just would have been like, well, we care, and we think the audience should care. Where like the trucks going by will have the different a different number of wheels from shot to shot.
Right, right, right.
Like
Yeah.
the panda that they'll show will look different from one
From
shot to
shot to
the next
shot.
shot.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's a almost a totally different design. And often it's like there's an executive or a non-artistic person who just looks at it quickly and says that's good enough.
Right. The numbers pencil out, yay, we saved X number of dollars.
Yeah, and we want it to be better than good enough, and
Right.
we'll go the extra effort to make sure that these things hook up and work out. So hopefully the regular public will eventually get sick of being fed stuff that is good enough and
Right, right.
gravitate toward things that are good.
Yeah, no, I mean, the fact that AI books and movies have not taken off by this point kind of shows me that, there's still hope for like I said, I'm sure some things will be replaced with AI or be used in the pipeline in some way, shape, or form. I'm not going to say AI will not be used because it probably will be, but you're still going to have some level of human input. But whatever that is, like you said, that's kind of where we are now. What exactly is that? How much of it is going to be drawn or analog versus,
And
prompting?
so
But
going back to your actual original question of like advice
yeah,
would be like, you know, keeping in mind that the not knowing
tools.
what's going to be in terms of careers, etc. Just having a really strong fundamental base of skills that you can
Mhm.
apply to different areas. So just
Sure,
like learning anatomy, just
sure,
drawing skills, learning perspective, composition, color theory, to just be a good all around artist, a
sure,
strong storytelling artist that you could then use those abilities to see what is going to come up. And it's something you had mentioned earlier before we actually started the interview. Like the gaming industry was like huge, where people were like able to take just general storytelling and apply that
right,
to games, not just
sure,
animation. Although like I see the gaming industry like gravitating very heavily toward the AI and maybe moving away from humans. But again, we need the humans to do it and guide it.
right,
And it
right,
was like, and I had heard like an interesting allegory about even using AI that used gaming as a great example where um, I I use this with my students too, where the majority of them are gamers. So
sure,
at the question being, if you were presented with like you heard this was a great new game, and you start the game up and you see the options at the very beginning, that's it. Option A is to play the game to the end, or option B is to go right to the end. What would you do? And they're like, well, we're there to play the game. And I'm like, well, that's what art is. Art is
right,
playing the game. Option B, the using the AI, is going right to the end. So you're not
right.
you're not experiencing anything. You're just getting the end result without having the experience. And that's so um, artists should try to stay away from AI as much as possible. Develop
Right,
their own skills,
right. Their own style, their
their
own
own
understanding of it.
and with particular to storyboarding, with regard to animation or even comic books, just life skills like just reading books and comics and watching movies and taking it all in and being able to figure out how to come up and tell your own stories.
Sure. No, yeah, I think that's all really relevant stuff. All right. Well, we appreciate your time. Where can my students kind of find any of your, socials or websites or anything you want to promote or
Yeah, I mean, I have a website that I don't often update because I get busy with work, so
sure, sure.
I
That's
don't
good.
end
It's a
up
good problem to
updating it. But
have.
rayalma.com.
Uh,
And I think from there, there's like links to like I have a little YouTube channel that like I have some of my animatics on there from Beavis and Butthead and some other
oh,
stuff.
great. Yeah, so they can
Um,
see examples.
yeah, and because it's like one of the growing up as an illustrator working as a freelancer, the way to get work back then was all about like showing a portfolio, like a physical portfolio.
Right, yeah. You had
Uh,
your big, yeah.
and
I have
then
one of
like,
the
but now like in working in animation, you have to have like a reel. You have to have
Right. Yeah.
much more of a website and a social presence. But what I mainly have found out working in animation is like so much of it is networking, is just
Sure. Yeah.
is meeting people, being being reliable, being a nice person, being somebody
Yeah.
that people want
That's
to work with.
another person I email, I talked with in a different interview was like, it's a small world, and if you get the reputation of hard to work with, even you better be
Yes,
really good because
yes.
there's enough people who aren't maybe as good as you, but are easier to get along with, and that person's probably going to get the job.
Yeah, it goes such a long way. Like
Yeah.
when you realize that somebody's a team player,
Right.
and
Yeah.
when I was self-employed as a freelance illustrator working alone, didn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
I could be
Sure.
an asshole because I'm not with anybody. But yeah, when you're working with animation is very much teamwork.
Right.
Requires that kind of cooperation.
All right. Well, thank you for your time and all your insights. I think we all learned a lot about, what makes a good storyboard and a good animatic. And it's always fun to hear. For me, hearing stories about Mad Magazine is always great as someone who grew up reading it. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Dave, and I hope I helped.